Football is awesome. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Friday Night Roots. I'm your host, Justin Thomas. Let's get into the video. But before we do that, do me a huge favor, like the video, share the video with your friends if you can, subscribe if you can. Appreciate all the love we can get. Let's get into it. Super stoked to do this video. It'll be similar to yesterday when I previewed the Chiefs-Bills game. I also wanted to preview the Commanders-Eagles game. NFC Championship. Doesn't get better than this. Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm just super excited. I mean, this is the best time of year to just get fat on the couch and just watch football all day. So I'm excited to continue doing that. And football in January is just pure electric intensity, where every hit, pass, and play could decide glory or heartbreak. And that just, it's just a culmination of hard work during the season that all these guys are putting in. And with the stakes the stakes are higher than ever. And I just think the cold air intensifies everything, and just, this is just why we love this time of year. And I'm super excited to jump in and just get going. So let's talk some football. NFC East football. Yeah, Commanders Eagles. I mean, this is just about it's like a match made in history. I mean, this is just one of those games that you're just so excited for. Adam Peters, the new GM, the Niners' old assistant GM, versus Howie Roseman, who's established himself as an awesome GM, built an awesome team there in Philly. Adam Peters, who's absolutely completely turned around that Commanders franchise with Dan Quinn. And then we got Dan Quinn versus Nick Sirianni. Not the biggest Nick Sirianni fan in the world. I think he's a little childish, maybe a little could be on fraud alert, just because he's a CEO head coach, he's not a play caller. So I don't know. I'm impartial on him. I guess we'll really see if Nick Sirianni's worth a damn if they make it to the Super Bowl and win, or if they make it to the Super Bowl and don't win, or don't win to on Sunday. So anyway, super excited to see Quinn versus Sirianni. That's just an awesome matchup. Two guys. Dan Quinn's been in the league a while, so he knows his shit. Yeah, I mean these two teams have been bouting since the 30s, when the Al Capone days, right, back in the mob days. Both of these teams, I don't know if, for those who know their football history, both of these teams that were playing each other are known for the body bag game, and for those who don't know, the body bag game is the one where after the game the Philly coach said. I think they injured like 9 starters that game, and he said, "Yeah, they're going to need to bring body bags next time." And then, ironically enough, there's another historical game tied to this: Michael Vick and the Eagles versus Donovan McNabb and the Redskins, and ultimately the Eagles ended up just killing the Redskins at that time. So just another classic matchup. But let's jump into the modern times. Sorry for going off on that little rant. Just a little bit of football history for you guys. Week 11, these teams met up for the first time this year. 26-18 Philly. Just Philly had control the whole time, it seemed. Jaden was definitely not as comfortable as you'd normally see him in these games, so it kind of wasn't a surprise that game turned out that way. But then just shortly after, it just gets better. Week 16, these teams see each other right before the season ends. 36-33 Washington, but there's a little bit of a caveat to this one. Jalen Hurts didn't play. I mean, yes, it's one of those things you want to say doesn't matter, given the state of their offense and they're not playing the greatest, but it really does matter, and it does make a difference. So Jalen wasn't playing in Washington, so they ended up going 1-1 in the division this year. For me, this game comes down to two guys. It comes down to Jaden Daniels and Mr. Saquon Barkley. I mean, those are going to be your game changers for this one. I mean, I'm wrong with that, and hopefully another guy stands out, but in my brain, it really pivots on those two. So, in terms of, because they're back in Philly, in terms of the weather, I was throughout the week kind of keeping track of the weather at Lincoln Financial. So it looks like there's no rain, no snow on the schedule. It's supposed to be 40 something degrees, high 40s during the day, 20s, mid 20s in the evening. So shouldn't be, they're playing at like noon my time, Pacific time. So shouldn't be too cold. Should be clear weather. So weather should not be a factor, but it definitely, and from my opinion, could have, I think last week versus the Rams did have an impact, fumbles, turnovers, stuff like that. So, I'm going to cut to the chase with Saquon. He had 145 plus yards in both of these matchups against the Commanders. that's a big fucking deal. He also had, he's coming off a week where he had 200 against the Rams also, so that's just something that can't be ignored by the Commanders defense and their game planning this week. Washington did only allow 100 to Gibbs, and I know that's a lot, but I'm not going to say, for a team as dynamic as the Lions, who were the number one seed in the NFC, you keeping him to 100, in my opinion, is a victory. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of yards, but I feel like he could have gone for a lot more. It could have been worse. I mean, I think the Lions offense was number one in points scored per game at like 31 and a half or something. So, I mean, to keep Gibbs to 100 is a big accomplishment by Washington, I think. And I think they would be, obviously you can't tell what the future looks like, but I think if they said, oh, you only allowed if you're looking into the future and said, oh, you guys only allowed 100 to Saquon Barkley in the NFC Championship game, I don't know. I'd probably take that. I'd be pretty pleased. So, Washington on the other side of the ball was a top 5 offense this year. So they also did just put 38 points up against the number one seed in the NFC to the Detroit Lions. So they're definitely something that the Eagles can't ignore on their end of the football. And they saw them twice this year. So they've seen firsthand what this team's about. And not only that, to boost some confidence, Daniels comes off a 300-yard 2-touchdown, 122 passer rating game versus the number one seed in the NFC, the Lions, excuse me. So that's a big deal that can't be ignored. I think the big key that I highlighted today in my notes when I was kind of prepping for this, stop the Philadelphia run. If the Commanders want a shot, slow down Barkley. No one's been able to slow him down this year. And obviously the Eagles per PFF are still sporting a top 5 O-line. They might even be the second best. Lane Johnson at tackle. I mean, that O-line is just fantastic. So it's going to be a challenge. You got to slow them down, and it'll be interesting to see, how that goes for the Commanders. But another thing, kind of put more pressure on the Eagles here. Hurts has been under 180 yards the last 6 of his 7 games, so that can't be ignored. I know just the way the Eagles are right now in their offense. I mean, they're so Saquon is the offense, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I think you can still get to the Super Bowl, on the back of Saquon Barkley. I don't think you can win the Super Bowl on the back of Saquon Barkley. Someone at some point in the next 2 or 3 weeks is going to figure out that you have to just load the box and stop Saquon. But for the Eagles, that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world either, because then you got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith on the outside, and hoping Jalen doesn't have concussion, symptoms still. I mean, it looks like he does, but hopefully he doesn't, and he can actually throw the fucking football. I mean, the Eagles still have a chance. I mean, they have a good fighting chance. So, it's just going to come down to who game plans this better and who executes it better. So, fundamental football. None of that. I kind of did want to talk a little bit about AJ Brown. I just think he's being a fucking diva. And it's hard to be a diva in the NFL when you average 1 catch and fucking less than 10 yards a game. Like, dude, sit down. Like, I get you're good, and I'm not saying he's not good. He's an outstanding football player, very gifted. But right now, he's playing like shit, and he's not getting open. He's not creating separation. And I'll give him half the credit, but all the other half, Jalen's playing like shit too. Not seeing through on his throws, inaccurate throwing. Seems like he's not comfortable in the pocket at all in any of his games. So just something to keep an eye out for. A stat that did kind of poke out to me today that I did want to talk about. Washington's defense had 5 takeaways last week, 3 interceptions and 2 fumbles. And the Commanders' defense has just been so all year. I mean, so to have a big game like that against the number one team in the NFC is a huge bright spot and a huge building block for them going into this NFC Championship game against the Eagles. But yeah, and not only that, keep in mind though, Philly against the Rams, I mean, they took 7 sacks on only 20 passing attempts. I mean, that is almost half of the dropbacks. Jalen was getting sacked. So I don't know if the Eagles' offensive passing protection was off that day or something, but I mean, it didn't look good that day. And Philly's D-line is pretty good too. I mean, they're very good at stopping the run. Pass rush is okay. Carter's insane. I know they have 5 bags versus the Rams, which is pretty good. That's just because I think the Rams were struggling to get open against Philly. But yeah, huge key matchup that I had to write down. Slay Mitchell versus Diami Brown and Scary Terry. That's going to be a matchup. I mean, two best corners, two awesome receivers who've been both cooking it up lately. Diami Brown for the Commanders. Jaden seemed to find him a lot. Scary Terry McLaurin. I mean, I don't even need to talk about how awesome he is when he gets into open space. So those are going to be an awesome matchup. And another thing that Eagles do need to keep an eye on is Zach Ertz has scored a touchdown 3 of the last 4 games. So he's kind of be in the mix a little bit. So yeah, anyway, the last time these teams played was the 1990 season, and that was the body bag game where 9 players were hurt. But they did end up meeting in the postseason for the wild card game where Washington didn't end up getting their revenge. 6-20 Washington. Washington ended up going on to the divisional round and losing anyway. But it was still awesome. So I just wanted to highlight that. And then for my keys to victory for this matchup, for the Commanders first, stop Saquon. For the Commanders, try and get your running game going. Don't put it all on Jaden if you can. Robinson, Eckler, they're very good out of the backfield in terms of checkdowns. They're also very good in terms of screens. Run screens, run checkdowns. Somehow get the ball rolling. Don't throw the ball 50 times if you can avoid it. I think not only that, Washington needs to put pressure on Jalen by making him throw. I get loading the box can be a risk to slow down Saquon Barkley because then you have risk of getting a deep threat. Someone or the Philly taking a deep shot, but man, just put as much pressure on Jalen as you can. Just try and get there as quick as you can. Dial up some blitzes if you can. And I think both have decent defensive lines. It depends on which one shows up and which one plays better, which one plays better fundamental football this week. And it can't be ignored from my end either. Eagles still have the second best O-line in the NFL. That just can't be ignored. It's true. They're so dynamic. They're so strong. They're so big. And I think a key that I think something the Commanders could do that could really benefit them this week is maybe run Jaden Daniels a little bit more. I know that sounds crazy, like when you're trying to make a Super Bowl run to run your quarterback more. But in the games that Jaden played the Eagles, they shut him down in the run. And I think that's a big aspect of Jaden Daniels' game that's still underrated and not talked about enough, and that maybe some of these teams aren't preparing for as well. Because if he's got Eckler, he's got Robinson, he's got Scary Terry, he's got Diami Brown, but instead of hand it off for a few times and then give Jalen on a reverse sneak or something, I think that could be utilized very effectively, especially against the Eagles secondary because they're good. And then the mental side of this football game that I always love to talk about. This game's going to come down to who shows up and who smacks who in the mouth first. That's what it comes down to. Who's going to smack who in the mouth and say, "Yep, this is it. We're here." And I think that's who's going to win the game, who plays more fundamental football, who executes properly. So let's get into my prediction as we close this out. My prediction for this game, I got 24-23 Commanders. Go Commanders, go. My brother's an Eagles fan, so I'm not super inclined to vote for or cheer for the Eagles, but on the contrary, I do really think Jaden Daniels and I really do think the Commanders and Dan Quinn can have an opportunity to create an upset in this game, as long as they can slow down Saquon. But if they can't slow down Saquon, the Eagles could easily run away with this game. But I'm still going 24-23 Commanders. I think on the panel of 10, when I was kind of generating what I thought my predictions should be, only 1 out of 10 panel judges predicted Commanders over Eagles. So I know I'm in the minority here. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm super excited to see what happens. And as always, let's talk some football. Love you.